In this video, I want to talk about what it means to be a highly sensitive man and my journey from the beginning of life up until now. Or not really from not from when I was a baby, but you know what I mean. So I've had some time to reflect. I just finished a 3-day silent retreat where I had no electronics, so no cell phone, no laptop. It was at a beautiful lake, had a hiking trail, and also it was just very silent and calm. And it's the first time I've been able to truly disconnect since last summer. So we're talking about probably like 7-8 months. And while at the retreat, I got a chance to just read and really decompress, which I think all of us, from time to time, just being a human species, we all need time to take care of ourselves and to relax, because we're always doing, we're always going, we're always achieving or moving forward, or at least I believe that's how some of us are wired. So it just becomes natural. So in this decompression, I reread a book that I actually listened to on audio probably about 3 years ago. And it's called The Highly Sensitive Person by Dr. Elaine Aron. And in this book, it discusses how 15 to 20% of the population in the world is, and this has been researched clinically back in the early 1990s, how our nervous systems are wired to process things more deeply, to take in more stimulation, and to have a propensity to become over aroused. And, it's interesting because when I say process things deeply, I mean to really have a strong emotional appreciation for whether it be nature, whether it be art, whether it be music, to be able to really feel things from whether it be from the environment or just on an emotional sensitivity level. And when I mention overstimulation, I mean just whenever you're out in the environment, or there's music, or there's lots of people, or there's noise, whatever it is, since a highly sensitive person would process things deeply, then it's almost like a gift and a curse. And you will also become over aroused or overstimulated more easily as well. And this has been one of the biggest patterns that has played out within my entire life. Growing up, I had issues with health and issues with severe, massive migraine headaches when I was all the way from when I was 7 years old up until about the age of 11. And these headaches were pulsating. It almost felt akin to somebody hitting me upside the head with a baseball bat. And the only time these headaches would occur is when I would do some type of activity where my heart rate would increase. So whether it's playing soccer at recess or playing basketball, anything where my physical output and my heart rate, variability went up, then I would get these pulsations would come into my head. And I went to doctors and had many different tests done and on my head, and everything came back negative. Like, oh, there's nothing wrong. So fast forward again, this went on for 3 or 4 years to the point of trying out for Little League baseball practice. I was at the age of 11 and got a little bit aggressive or too competitive in one of the drills, which was a coach pulled out a stopwatch and he said, I'm going to time all of you guys to see who's the fastest, from home plate to first base. And that competitive side came out in me a little bit and said, hey, I'm going to sizing up all the other people around me. I said, I'm gonna be first in this. Not thinking about, the pulsating or the condition that I had been working with, for years up until that point. So, I'm sprinting home plate to first, giving it all my got. And like clockwork, do, 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 those headaches my head started throbbing. It always started with the heart. I could start feeling my heartbeat. And then that heartbeat would move up into my head. And then my head would start pulsating. So that, long story short on that, the headache, while in the past, it would subside whenever I would start to focus on my breath. I would inhale and I would exhale, and I would sometimes close my eyes and just do this repeatedly. And I could literally feel my heart rate and the headaches subsiding. So unbeknownst to me at that time, this was like a mindful breathing exercise or practice in order to reduce stress in the body. So, anyways, fast forwarding to the pulsating, the headache. Well, it didn't really go away this time, to the point of later in that evening, I ended up going to the emergency room, ended up having surgery to remove a tumor the size of a grapefruit. So think about that, age of 11, think about having something abnormal. And I was fortunate, it was benign, but that was a pretty interesting stressor on the body to go through an invasive surgery at that age. I have this long scar down my chest to prove it, a beautiful tattoo, we'll call it. And that was like my first encounter on a sensitivity level of, for me in the art, in need of self-care and the importance of making sure that that's going to be a priority. So interesting enough, you go through life and you have, you go through high school. For me, I'm not going to skip this part. I had this surgery and I was 11 years old. And about 5 months after the surgery, my father passed away. So I was 12 years old. I had this surgery I was still recuperating from. Then my father passed away. And at that particular age, I was so young that I don't want to say I was in shock, but I didn't understand the meaning of it. I had like no emotions at the time. It was weird to me. I wanted to feel, but I couldn't feel anything during that time. I don't even remember shedding really any tears about it until later down the line. So this happens, and I'm going into my 7th grade year in middle school. So this happened in 6th grade when my pops, had passed away, and then I had the surgery, etc. Going into 7th grade, I actually started to experience bullying. It's an interesting dichotomy because I was always bigger than a lot of the other kids growing up, like in the same grade level. I always, at that point, I was, much taller, but I was also much bigger than a lot of the kids. And I got to 7th grade and that was no longer the case. There was 8th graders, there was 9th graders. And, I'm this big kid, and I'm supposed to be tough and kind of wearing this mask of, I'm bigger than everybody, etc. But then, going to 7th grade, and 7th grade was probably one of the most challenging grades for me as someone who dealt with bullying often. First year, at a new school, the middle school, father had passed away the year before. I had this surgery a year before as well. And I felt alone. I felt like I didn't necessarily have, I didn't really have anyone to speak to or to express myself to. And even if I did, I didn't know how to do that. So my mother, she was taking care of, she was processing her own things, from losing, my father in the process. But I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want to really, I knew that she had a lot on her plate, just raising us kids, my sister and I. And, I didn't really want to put anything extra on her plate. So I held all these things in. And as I held these things in, what happened as I got older and got to high school and eventually got to college, I started to have anger outbursts. I would become frozen. I would become this person that was not able to effectively communicate, to express my emotions. And I had no conscious awareness of this and the root or the cause of it, because I had no understanding of what emotions were and the importance of expressing them. And fast forward, I've done a tremendous amount of practices, learning the body, holistic nutrition, yoga, mindfulness, meditating, all these different tools in order to be able to take care of the self. And in that process, I've lost over 60 pounds of weight and have kept it off. I've also been able to, I used to have severe acne. Even as an adult, I had skin rashes that I had, that I would get from eating certain foods. And even when I wasn't necessarily, quote unquote, eating foods that may even seem like they would be allergenic or sensitive to my body, I would still have these rashes. So I spent a large portion of my life in this almost stressful state without even knowing. And the more and more I started to take care of my body, and the more and more I became self-aware of the importance of looking at the body in a holistic manner, looking at the mind, looking at our thoughts, looking at the physical body, what we're putting in our body, what we're nourishing it with, looking at our emotions. How are we able to feel our emotions? When we have these emotions of anger, of sadness, of happiness, of joy, are we able to really feel them in the body and be present with them? And a lot of us, especially men in particular, we don't necessarily have models to teach us how to effectively communicate and to feel those emotions in the in the moment. So all we do is years and years and years and years and years and years go on, and we suppress them, and we suppress and suppress and suppress. And when we do that, that's energy in the body. It still stays inside of the body. So as it stays, it shows up in other areas, whether that could be addictions. For me, that was, food. And I mentioned in the previous video, porn. At one point, it was a sex addiction. It shows up in different areas of our lives, and we have no idea where some of these things are coming from. Rewind back to what I mentioned at the beginning, being a highly sensitive person and being aroused easily. And when I say aroused, I'm talking about the nervous system being aroused. We have two, just to kind of explain a little bit of background as well, our autonomic nervous system is, what is wired throughout our entire body, and it's regulated by our adrenals. And our adrenals, whenever we do anything that stresses us out, we produce cortisol. So those adrenals, even though they're only the size of a grape, And the more things that we do that put stress on the body, and it can be physical, it can be mental, it can be emotional, the more we tax the adrenals and we push out more and more cortisol, which goes into adrenaline, which goes into norepinephrine in the brain. And these things can make us more anxious. They can make us wired and tired. And they can also keep us in a constant state of almost like over arousal and fear and just having a sped up clock. And I spent the majority of my life in this state, and I didn't realize this until I got into yoga and meditation. These were big things for me, and these are big things that I speak to and I coach clients on as well. The art of starting a actual meditation practice, regrounding, recentering ourselves. And as a highly sensitive person, it's self-care is the most important aspect. It's number one. There is nothing that is more important than taking care of the self. Because if we don't take care of the self, it doesn't matter what all we do. It doesn't matter how much joy or how much money we have. We are not going to be able to experience life to the fullest. And we're not going to be able to express ourselves to our truest nature because we're going to be in a state of shock or a state of stress. So, getting back to just accepting being highly sensitive, there's a test that I'll put also, I'll link in the description notes, and I'll also will link a mindfulness meditation for you guys out there who are interested in beginning or just checking out a new meditation, because meditation is by far, it's one of the easiest ways to add more time to your day than you may believe. And I say that because I know, the natural thought process is, man, if my clock is sped up and already have so much stuff going on, I don't have the time to add more stuff. But if your clock is so sped up, whether it be from eating foods that, you may have allergies or sensitivities to and not even know, whether it be from drinking too much coffee or green tea or stimulants in general, to be able to elevate yourself and have the energy to get through your day, whether it be through this environment that we live in. It's not the same type of environment. The soil isn't the same type of soil. There's pollution, there's all these things. And I'm not mentioning this to add stress. I'm mentioning it as a reality of the times that we live in. It's even more crucial for us to make sure that we recalibrate, look at the areas within our own health that we may feel like we're off in, and create a successful blueprint around that. So, in closing, this is kind of long, let's see, 18 and a half minutes, yeah? Bear with me, if you got through this far, man, you're special. Like, hit the like button if you liked it, subscribe. Again, my intention is to put out more content. I know it's been a little bit of time since the previous video, but just more content to connect. I could sit here and I could talk all day and just give out tools, but I really want to add the context and the personal experience to this, because anything that I talk about or that I may recommend, it's something that I've naturally tried. And it's up to you in a sense of if you're open to it, to give it a try. But at the same time, whatever you got to do, make sure, put yourself first. Don't overexhaust yourself. Trust me, I've done this many times. And it's something that still to this day is a battle. I have to put more conscious awareness to it. But taking steps and putting yourself on a daily plan that takes care of yourself is the best way to go. So